I played every version of Surf that I could find in 1 week, and some were terrible, while others were surprisingly good. There was only one rule: there has to be a surf ramp. And I didn't even follow this rule, but I did learn a lot about what makes Surf so good, and how that can quickly break down. But first, we have to start with the good stuff, the core games, CSGO Surf. Home to the biggest surf community in the world, thousands of maps, and all of the chaos. CSGO Surf was popularized by Leafy, Raccoon Eggs, and JC the Caster. CSGO is now a more developed community with tons of servers. Most servers in this community run Tier 1 and Tier 2 maps, the easiest, and for some, their only experience is Surf Utopia, but there are some rising surfers on CSGO doing amazing things. Surfing in CSGO feels great, does the job, and is most importantly free. However, the #1 rival to the CSGO Surf community is Counter-Strike Source, considered the mecca of Surf. Counter-Strike Source has some minor technical differences from CSGO that make it the preferred game for pro surfers. A rate of 66 ticks or updates per second versus 64 ticks on CSGO, which means it's slightly easier. The model size being slightly smaller so players can fit into tighter gaps, and hundreds of maps made for their specific game. This makes Counter-Strike Source the preferred game for surf aficionados, who also want the most authentic experience. Think about it, surf maps have been made for these settings since 2005, while CSGO launched in 2012. Most importantly, the game just feels right. It runs more smoothly because it's older and easier on your system. But CSS is not just highly regarded because of the game itself, but because of KSF servers. KSF is considered the most competitive and prestigious surf server in the world. Since 2010, surfers have flocked to this place, hoping to test themselves against the fastest times and most difficult maps. As a consequence, it is the most developed and difficult server to climb, but this too is a game we've covered all too often. The origin of Surf is CS 1.6. Surf is thought to have originated in CS 1.6 all the way back in 2004 by Mariond. It is nearly equivalent to the feel of Source movement. It's responsive, the ramps are real, and the units are accurate. Despite being older, CS 1.6 isn't lower in quality, it's just different. The ramps are smaller on average than in Counter-Strike Source, and so are the maps. This is because 1.6 maps must be smaller due to the game's built-in limit. Their b-hopping is distinct as well, and the world record runners do this totally differently. Regardless, there are tons of maps and a lot of talented players. Also, this game runs better on potato PCs if that's important for you. One interesting system is that they also rank maps by their quality, which is something that mainline Surf was never able to do. Then there's TF2 and Gmod. Many legendary surfers have come from TF2, some of whom had started on the more popular Rocket Jump, a game which also has its own surf ramps. But as far as TF2 skill surf goes, it's pretty decent. On my system, it sometimes stutters, and there is the occasional ramp bug, but it is surf through and through. Gmod felt slightly better for me, and this is actually where I first started surfing way back in 2013. Back then, the community was bigger, as was TF2's, but smaller servers still survive in both games. Many of the maps are the same that you'll find in Source and CSGO, and they work perfectly fine. So if you have either downloaded and you're short on storage space, surfing here is completely acceptable. And now we've arrived at our first jank, Portal 2. Sounds like it could be amazing, and it's not. Around 2013, a couple of maps were made for Surf. One of the creators acknowledged that it wasn't exactly what you'd expect. When you jump to board and ride the ramp, you slowly fall off. This is because the Portal games lock your side-to-side movement in the air once you have speed. You cannot turn in the air, nor stick to a surf ramp. And they don't allow you to change critical values, like SV Air Accelerate. But you can use portals with them, I guess. A second set of maps called bhop_surf are actually completable if you change the gravity values. The ramps function differently. You can't change your height while on them. And I would have a tough time calling this fun. Overall, Surf in Portal 2 is quite poor. Left 4 Dead 2, one of my all-time favorite games, was similarly bad. Someone did manage to recreate Mesa with the correct ramp texturing and overall structure, but I lagged a lot on the ramps, and the gravity was set much higher by the map maker, much like Portal 2. And while I was able to complete most of the map, the last board was way too steep for the settings. Left 4 Dead 2 also has its own unique map, Dead Air Surf, with some interesting parts. Because you can't turn in the air, parts of the map guide you in the right direction, and the map had some built-in features to reward high speed, but the feel of Surf was only partly there. While the ramps felt good, actually pointing yourself in the right direction was very hard. Portal 2 and Left 4 Dead 2 never had developed Surf communities to work on the maps and game mode, which is mainly why the Surf isn't good. Half-Life, a game that's almost 25 years old, does allow for Surf, and it's really legit. Of the maps I tried, I was able to load SX Darkness, which I was pretty bad at, while the real run looks very technical, and Surf Pipelines, which I was extremely bad at. It required close to perfect boards and strafes to get me over each wall. I found these because of a compilation of Half-Life Surf, which looks absolutely insane, so obviously I have some work to do. All in all, Half-Life is a rabbit hole I'm yet to traverse. It is most similar to CS 1.6 with small ramps and small maps, but it is fascinating to me that Half-Life has its own smaller movement community, including B-Hop, that has never been covered on YouTube, apart from the occasional run like this. But Quake, one of the first multiplayer shooters ever created, was a true mystery to me. My community had sent me a legendary video about Quake Slide, supposed to have happened all the way back in 2002. So I did some research and installed Quake World, a big mod package for the original Quake. And with some digging and an open server, I was able to find the original Slide maps, and they definitely had ramps you could ride. You could affect your height by moving towards and away from the ramp, and it was a different theme, jumping down a long mountain, essentially with ramps as a way to gain and maintain speed. But then I saw Race 4. This is definitely Surf, and it got me thinking, if this was around in 2002, doesn't that mean that it would predate the creation of Surf in 2004? But that might be a story for another day. As you probably know, there are also several Quake-inspired games which also happen to have Surf. For example, Reflex Arena, which actually looks incredible, with small but usable ramps and beautiful texturing. The point is that for the core games, based around Source, Gold Source, and Quake movement, Surf has manifested as a staple in gaming. But the next part of this list is dedicated to Surf that you can try right now, like literally a click and download and you're there. The first being Roblox. I tried this for the first time over a year ago, and I was blown away by the quality of the game. For a platform that doesn't have the best reputation, Surf is really good. Most importantly, the ramps function properly. They don't give you free units. You can change your height while on the ramp, and you can ride the ramps by holding your strafe key. Strafing itself is responsive and really powerful. In fact, it might be too powerful for your liking. And there are a lot of unique maps. My literal only complaint is some functionality loss, like no save state system or built-in turn binds that you can find in Counter-Strike Source, but it does have full leaderboards and a replay system. Roblox Surf was at one point positioned to overtake CSGO Surf, both in terms of numbers and competitiveness, and despite some shrinkage in the game's size, it was promising. In terms of negatives, there was reportedly an update that really hurt the game. Changes to the game's physics that require most maps to be updated. However, I returned this week after the new update and it feels fine. I didn't feel a major difference since the last time I played. The biggest advantage to Surf is that you can download and play in like 2 seconds if you've ever played Roblox. Just make sure you use the FPS unlocker. Krunker, on the other hand, was incredibly frustrating. Maybe you can tell, but the physics are different. Just staying on the ramp is a unique system that I don't recognize. You also have to hold W and A constantly. You can't turn in the air. Because of this jarring difference, it feels like the physics are just not consistent. This is a problem that will pop up multiple times in this list. When you cannot reliably produce a result in a game, it is way more frustrating to fail because it is beyond your control. The most satisfying thing about Surf is hitting that crazy smooth board for the first time and then hitting it again and again. But in Krunker, it feels like the same inputs will send you flying over the ramp. You continue to slide up and down with far less control, for example compared to Roblox. But this may be because it's different and I'm not used to it. Granted, there were a couple maps that felt really good, like Surf Ravine, with large smooth ramps to board. But no, it does not feel like Surf. In addition to this, Krunker Surf has far less functionality, no replays, no save states, etc. But the maps are completable, and there's like 50 of them. Krunker Surf was more of an attempt and an experiment with the game's movement system, which in the base game is actually quite complex and beautiful. And now, for the Surf games that are one click away. If you've never surfed before, you can try it now. The cream of the crop, Crazy Game Surf, was the highest quality of all of these. There are 3 levels, the ramps work, and you can zoom pretty fast. You can turn in the air quite well if you move slowly. Specifically, it uses conventional air strafing with A and D and not W, and ramps you can ride and flick off of normally. The b-hopping is responsive as well and can be done by holding jump, which is crucial. If you've never surfed before, you can play this game to get a basic idea. There was also an attempt to recreate the classic Surf Utopia in a similar way. This version does lag a lot and doesn't look too great, but it kind of shows the technology is possible. Surf isn't Battlefield, it's easy to run and be reinvented in tons of formats, like this attempt to make Surf in the programming language Godot, or this version of Surf made in only an hour. But ultimately, no quick version of Surf could compare to the standalones. There are a bunch of games that have attempted to extract Surf from Counter-Strike source, or at least the feeling of it, and reimagine it in unique ways. Ballistic Zen violates our rule, but it was literally made as Surf without the ramps. In Ballistic Zen, you must complete lines, jumping across huge gaps and utilizing the environment to your advantage. This game places huge emphasis on conserving your momentum, never turning too quickly lest you lose all your speed. But there's not one single surf ramp in the entire thing. The reason why this is so closely related to Surf is because the developer dropped a 50-minute documentary about the game. It was about how he loved Surf and a prototype called Perfect Stride, and how Surf inspired him to make his own movement game based on it. And then he stripped out the basic mechanic, ramping, for a more digestible product. I absolutely loved playing it for the first time, and found lines that challenged me. The fact that you cannot quickly turn, and that you build speed while turning, is exactly like Surf, but it's not Surf. Which is why Hoverflow shattered my expectations for the existing Surf standalones. From the preview, it didn't look legit, lots of motion blur. When I first stepped into it, I thought my hunch was confirmed, lots of flat platforms and strange controls. But then the game did something interesting. It explained that you can air strafe while holding W, not A and D, and that it was disabling my A and D keys until the end of the level. And then I turned in the air and it clicked. Soon there was a surf ramp and I rode it, and instantly got that classic feel of ramping. I was hooked. This was a game that I had experienced for so many years. It was yet another hidden game inspired by Surf. Tons of levels with different routes based on your experience, KZ sections, B-hop sections, and plenty of ramps. I realized that Hoverflow was another attempt to make Surf far easier by removing the A and D keys, which you must sync with your mouse movement in regular Surf. So it was a little less daunting, just one key. But Hoverflow also provided tutorials at the start of each stage. These tutorials were aligned with my understanding of Surf and provide strong scaffolding for the learner. This may mean that Hoverflow is like a $9 full tutorial for surfing in general, something that the community has been missing. But for everyone else, Hoverflow is a huge surf game locked behind a paywall. There are tons of maps that I was not able to complete in a single session, but there are hundreds of free maps on CSGO. Does the atmosphere and beautiful aesthetic justify a purchase? Not according to the market. Just 5 reviews in over a year, but Hoverflow certainly stood out as a gem in the rough. A standalone surf game nearly lost to time. Much more well known was Hot Lava, a movement platformer that takes inspiration from KZ and Surf, one with dedicated surf ramps in it. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I was skeptical about this game. I'd seen footage and I wasn't hopeful. When I actually played the game, I really enjoyed the levels, but my suspicions were confirmed. In this game, you latch onto the ramps automatically, and you can jump on them. Both of these things are supposed to be impossible in Surf. And that's okay, it's not a surf game, it's Hot Lava. And there's some interesting tech you can do with Surf to go faster. But it would be hard to call this a Surf standalone, more like a really cool adaptation of a bunch of movement games. There were also a few titles we covered in our previous video that were direct attempts to make standalone Surf. Most of them capture the feeling of Surf but are yet to take off as products. Bunny Hop Extreme feels close to good, like all the ramps are a little bit too steep but function correctly anyway, and it's mostly a B-hop game that integrates Surf. But the Surf is real. The speed you have on the ramps is determined by your entry angle and speed coming in, and you can change your height on the ramp by moving left and right. Frag Surf does this too because it exactly mimics the Surf from source. Frag Surf is a complete recreation in Unity, but doesn't feature skill surf maps that you're likely familiar with. It mainly focuses on Trick Surf, where you complete combos in an arena, rather than a timed competition to get to the end zone, but it also has its fair share of B-hop maps to speedrun if you're into that. And Vivid Surf, which does the same, emulating source physics in Unity, this time with a major graphical update, multiple maps, and an in-game timer and leaderboard. I played this back when they had a demo and it felt great, but unfortunately, it isn't out yet, just like Momentum Mod. If you've ever watched this channel, you know we love Momentum. It is a revolutionary project to create a one-to-one surf standalone with tons of extra functionality, with all the maps from CSGO and Source, as well as B-Hop and Rocket Jump from TF2. For now, this game might be 100% free, but it's not fully released yet, and you can only play it if you apply and win the key lottery. And now, we've arrived at the most exciting group of games, the Jank. These are the game modes that made me pull my hair out, starting with Apex Legends. When surfing in Apex was first showcased, it got a lot of attention, partly because Apex was big at the time, but also because the graphics looked really cool. But unfortunately, trying to surf in Apex Legends was one of the most trying experiences I've ever had on this channel, and not because of the surfing. It required a third-party mod called R5 Reloaded. Downloading, installing, and launching the necessary mods just to surf took hours, and sometimes just wouldn't work. The mod is actually pretty useful if you want to get better at Apex, but for the sole purpose of surfing, I was losing my mind. And when I finally got it to load, this is what I found. It was working surf with what at first seemed to be correct physics. That's not surprising because Apex Legends is based on the Source engine. While Apex does have its own movement quirks, the surf is fine and feels like a more slippery version of CSGO. They even have their own twist on Surf Kitsune, which I was unable to finish, apart from the fact that there's only 3 maps easily available, and you don't get to choose what you play, the map just automatically changes. It seemed like ramps were giving me extra speed for riding them. This is bad, it isn't authentically surf. But all in all, Apex Surf looked promising if it had popped off and maintained a community. And props to the developers of R5 Reloaded for jumping through all the hoops to mod this game, because it's obviously not easy. As opposed to Titanfall 2, which had been around for a lot longer and had a more developed mod community. To play this, you have to install Northstar, then install the map as a mod. I was able to get it running fully within an hour, with some help from Darth Elmo, and I set air accelerate to 9,000 as recommended. It was pretty much the same as Apex Legends, in-game assets, speed gain from ramps, but you could use a grappling hook. Source engine games all maintain aspects of the original, so pioneers were able to test and use surf as a subject for their creation. These maps are the historical evidence of experimentation by a games community, taking the base software sold as product and making it their own. Next in Jank was Halo Infinite. So a video of Halo Surf was circulating around my community and I could almost immediately tell what was going on. There are ramps to ride without assistance, but you can barely air strafe or turn in the air in this game. So that's why all the ramps are curved. The ramps do the turning for you. And you can't really affect your height on the ramp, limiting maneuverability. But it was so much easier to load these up than Apex or Titanfall 2. You hold W and follow the curve of each ramp and pray that you went in the right direction. If you try to gain height by yielding your turn, you will eventually reach the top. I was also unable to beat this map, but this shows some progress with the 2 publicly available ones. Bottom line, when the map doesn't allow you to turn in the air, you end up feeling helpless, especially when there is an unavoidable respawn timer. Splitgate is a first-person shooter with portals with a splash of Halo. I have to say right off the bat, I really like this game. The gunplay was responsive and fast-paced, but of course, the surf. There were 2 maps, both made by Krayless. The first really got on my nerves. There is no conventional air strafing, just A and D to move you left and right. But you have a jetpack that you have to use on every ramp to stay on, unless that ramp is curved, just like Halo. But the curves are less severe and I was able to get used to the physics. These physics were consistent, reliable, and I was really surprised when I played Krayless' second level. By using the portals to gain speed, the ramps are much farther apart, and you are less reliant on the jetpack and more on surfing. I had a couple of good runs past the second level, but I gave up. The creator is insane at his own map. In fact, this one is really tight and interesting. Had Splitgate not petered out as a game, this might have really gone somewhere. Possibly the best game on this entire list is the new scuffed Epic B-Hop Simulator, and it was just horrible. This game was made as a meme back in 2020 during the pandemic. It's half joke, half time suck. It doesn't do a very good job of mimicking Source movement. For example, you have to turn way slower than in Surf and B-Hop and often lose control. And yes, this song plays the entire time. There's no way to reset and some of the maps can't be completed, or maybe I'm just bad, but there's surf physics for sure. It is a surf game. Funnily enough, the b-hop isn't that bad, although I had to use external turbines to get anything done. At this point, I was so skeptical about foreign surf mods that I was done. But Overwatch 2 was the biggest surprise of the entire list. Created by Yoda and Grandeur Hammers, it is the best feeling surf of all the jank. Big yellow surf ramps that you can ride and you can turn in the air. The trifecta. Like Roblox, Yoda managed to correctly mimic the function of ramps from source games. The ramps are genuine and do not give you speed for nothing. They punish you if you mess up, but if you know how to surf, you can perform satisfying and consistent routes with ease. This project is exactly what you want for a surf prototype, and Overwatch isn't even close to the source engine. But somehow they got air strafing to feel correct. They use a weird system to ensure you don't skip everything, a ramp requirement, forcing you to ride a minimum, but this also allows for some variety in routing, and there's like 9 different maps, not that many. The setup was really easy. You use a code in a custom game, and then turn on all the available maps. When the game doesn't hold your hand and you remove most of the jank, surf can work. It's disappointing that this didn't take hold on the Overwatch community like Lucio Surf did. This is a completely different game mode that focuses on Lucio's kit, but it makes sense since this would apply to the game and help Lucio mains develop their skill. And now we've arrived at the greatest potential for jank, mobile gaming. There are a few mobile surf games, some really bad, so we're just going to cover the 2 most important ones. First, b-hop Pro, by far the most popular mobile surf game ever made. If the numbers are correct, the game's population rivals that of the original. On the left hand side is directional speed and the right hand side is everything else. All of your aiming is on one little circle. To gain most of your speed, you actually have to flick hard on the ramp. It's more difficult to gain horizontal speed and laughably easy to gain height. And there are some advertisements every few fails, it's annoying. It's freemium mobile, what can you expect? But the physics are consistent and reliable. If you understand surf, you can easily beat a few maps. And as a consequence, I can see how others improve to the point where this is a legit speedrunning game for them. They even have a replay system to see tons of other routes. Not even CSGO or CSS has this. And some of the players are cracked. They are accustomed to this and take full advantage of the physics. On this remake of Surf Ski, they flick up to the optimal height and barely reach the end zone. It actually turns out that on some of the maps, half sideways is used. This is a harder way to surf in the main game. You just have to use different keys, but you also can't really see straight. Overall, if you're a mobile user looking for a multiplayer surf game, this is probably it. They also have a real community and a YouTube channel, and a Discord with personal bests and records, why not? But there is another mobile game that got very little coverage, CyberSurf. Now granted, I owned this app for a few years, and at some point paid for the full version, so it also has ads. But I can say without a doubt that the physics are superior. You build speed from gravity, you lose speed if you board the ramps improperly, and you don't shoot off the ramps. You can do surprisingly smooth boards with correct timing. And, opposed to the full range of movement in b-hop Pro, CyberSurf simplifies it to left and right sliders, a spectrum of turn rates. Does it feel right? It feels kinda slippery compared to Surf, but in direct comparison, to say Krunker, it is unfortunately a step up despite being a mobile game. My last exploration was into VR Surf. This is the next level of surf immersion, not really. VR Chat is a platform for folks to do whatever it is they do on this game, and I've known about this specific surf map for months, Surf Udon. There were speedruns on YouTube, it screamed jank, and when I first started playing the game, that's what I thought it would be. I just kept losing all of my speed on this ramp, even though I was following it perfectly with my mouse. But that's when I realized, they don't want you to move your mouse. VR Chat is surf, loosely defined without a mouse. The wide strafing you do makes it feel like one of those mobile runners, but you have a real velocity counter and can optimize for speed. The ramps are ramps and you can change your height on them. Most importantly, it was fun. I enjoyed it and wish there were more maps. It was like Temple Run with surf. I think this is what mobile games could have done. Simplify both the physics and the control scheme. Just left and right movement to mirror the gameplay loop of surf. Consistent and reliable physics that don't feel jank, and a focus on going faster by maintaining units. Rec Room VR, on the other hand, was not real surf at all. Rec Room VR is a lot like VR Chat, a social media platform with mini games. The problem is that I'm walking on the ramps. Except for this one red ramp, I got a taste of a slide there, and on this green ramp as well. Although it was most likely just a game slide mechanic. Unfortunately, no real surf here. There are also moments of surfing in the base Gorilla Tag maps, where you can slide on these walls. Sure, it's a ramp and it's interesting that this was built into the game without any mods, but I can't pay hundreds of dollars to buy a VR headset, so I couldn't test this. And lastly, Pavlov VR, which is exactly what surf in my dreams feels like. If you enjoyed this, please drop a like on the video and also go check out your local surf server, probably by going to the community browser in CSGO. And also shout out to all the folks who helped me with this project. And as always, good luck sliding those triangles.